while everyone is taking a seat. So welcome to this session on promoting fair agricultural transitions in Africa. So the session will be short, compact, lively, and we will make an announcement in the end, so please stay with us. So this is an important session, and this is a very important topic. 3 reasons. We actually believe that the dollar that is put in the African agriculture is the best dollar invested in economic and social development in the world to achieve the SDGs. And the main reason is actually 13 of the 17 SDGs are actually directly impacted by the African agriculture. Nutrition, of course, with half of the world undernourished in Africa. Poverty, again, more than half of extreme poverty in Africa, and this is mostly in rural areas. Health, with the high stunting rate. Gender equity, we all know that women are the main force in rural areas. And climate, both on adaptation, because climate change will mostly impact agriculture, and in particular in Africa, but also mitigation, because the alternative to more productive systems is deforestation. So from whatever angle you look at it, investing in the African agriculture is the best investment we can make to achieve the SDGs. The second reason why this session is important is that if you look in the last 30 years, there has been a structural underinvestment in the African agri-food systems. 20 years ago, we agreed on a framework called CADEP. We agreed to spend 10% of public investment in the agriculture. The reality is only 4 countries out of 54 in Africa managed or delivered against this 10% target. And the same goes with ODA, the Overseas Development Aid. Only 5% is spent on agriculture, and even more on the private investment. Only 3% of the FDIs are on the agri-food systems. So there is clearly a structural lack of investment in the African agriculture system. Second reason why this session and this topic is critical. And the third one is we need to make sure that this investment is spent efficiently. We need to agree on the definition. What is sustainable agriculture? What are the priorities under sustainable agriculture? What is the relative importance of productivity, climate, adaptation, mitigation, economic development? We need also to prioritize investments, which crops, which countries do we do by value chain, by country. So lots of very important questions, and this will be the topic of the session. So I will first leave the floor for a keynote speech from His Excellency Ale Mariam Desalegn, who served as Prime Minister of Ethiopia from August 2012 to April 2018. Ethiopia is actually one of these 4 countries which has delivered against the CADEP commitments, and not surprising, is also one of the countries which has grown the most in Africa and more broadly in the world in the last 15 years, and probably the emphasis that has been put on agriculture is one of the reasons why it has been so successful. His Excellency is already a board member and chairperson of the Alliance of Green Revolution for the Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA, so he's extremely, obviously, recognized figure of the agri-food business in Africa.
Thank you very much, moderator. First of all, this is a session on promoting fair food systems transition. And there was a question, what Africa is going to be transiting from? I think that's a basic question that has to be addressed. And Your Excellency, the President of the Paris Peace Forum, and the President of the UM6P, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, My job is very simple. I represent the African Union Strategic Committee, which is entrusted by the Union to negotiate with our partners in the North. So this is about North-South partnership and cooperation. And what do we think about this partnership is a key for my keynote. And in the first place, conventional agri-food system is based on uniformity in many ways, and it doesn't look into diversity. And Africa is a very diverse continent, and we need to look into that. Not only Africa, but the entire globe is diverse, and a uniform, one-size-fits-all kind of approach doesn't work. So we have to transit into a sustainable and resilient system for that matter. So economy of scale was the main issue, but in Africa, we have millions, tens of millions of smallholder farmers. So when we talk about transition, we need to talk about these smallholder farmers as well, not only the big industrial agriculture. Again, chemical fertilizer is being seen globally as something which has contaminated the soil in many places, but nonetheless, we have to look into areas specific where to use what. And we have to transit from resource-intensive program and projects into sustainable programs. I think this is where we have to transit. And as you know, a tropical land and soil structure in Africa is very much susceptible for land degradation, and it's already degraded, and we need to transit into a sustainable soil health mechanisms, and there is a need for transition. So I think for a question, we need to transit to a sustainable and resilient agro-food systems, is no question. Thank you for organizing this conference in Morocco, which is a gateway for North-South cooperation, and it is an appropriate place to discuss about this transition. So we need to have, I just wanted to focus on 5 basic things for consideration in this transition. The first one is, environmental considerations has to be one of the key in our work. When we do that, I think conservation agriculture and regenerative agriculture is something which is spoken these times loudly, but most of us, we do not properly understand what conservation agriculture is all about, what regenerative agriculture is all about. So I think there is knowledge deficit. And if our partners in the North has to support us, they have to support us in generating this knowledge in Africa through research and development, which is focused on those kind of things. This is important. I think we need to benefit out of that. I normally do not fully agree on the moral imperative where we ask the North to support Africa because they destroyed the climate. I think that narrative is no more an attractive one. What we have to do at this moment is to have a narrative that this transition is a win-win, that it is a benefit sharing, that conserving and making the agriculture sustainable and resilient in Africa has also very much a benefit to the North as well, because we are in a global village called the globe, the world in which we are in. Whatever happens in one part of the globe has an impact on the other part of the globe. We have seen the pandemic. Maybe in Africa was not so much affected as other continents. And the pandemic, the source is simply because of biodiversity loss. So I think the globe is connected. We are connected as global citizens. As responsible global citizens, Africans, we have to own our own projects and then seek for support rather than looking for somebody to help us out from our own problems. We have our own deep problems inside Africa, and we have to focus on that and seek for support outside, and then go for a win-win benefits. In so doing, I think we can generate more knowledge and be helpful in this regard. So there is investment deficit in transiting into sustainable and resilient agri-food systems. In this case, we have to revisit and reposition agricultural subsidies and incentives both in the north and the south. I think in order to generate financing, this is one of the key areas we have to look into. You know, most African countries are debt stressed, and there should be a mechanism. In our negotiation, we presented that there should be a mechanism to debt swap for, some kind of green investment in agri-food system. So I think this is one of the areas. And the earlier speakers also spoken about issues of de-risking. There are real and perceived risks in investing in Africa. So there should be a de-risking mechanism that helps investors to come from global north to the south, especially in Africa. So I think this calls for some mechanisms that help to de-risk those kind of investments. This is where we need support. In so doing, there is a win-win benefit. Investors and the countries where the investors can benefit from investing in Africa in this sector. I think we need to address one of the key deficits in food systems transition. That is infrastructure deficit in Africa. We cannot go away this. So we need to have a green infrastructure investment. You can see greener and cleaner production and technology systems and storage facilities, and all these are needed for investment to be more successful. I think it has been spoken time and again in the green energy. I don't want to deal with that. That is also infrastructure, needs to be invested in Africa. So there is a need for aggressive private sector investment in Africa, and that calls for policy prescriptions and conducive policy environment. We, in Africa, we have to do something which attracts more investment into Africa by dealing with all those red tapes that prohibit investors not coming to our continent. The third aspect is, of course, in the second one, when we talk about investment, I can give you one example. When the pandemic, and also because of the Russia-Ukraine war, the food and agri supply chain has been broken completely. Some of the North African countries, which were relying on the Ukraine for grains to be imported, has suffered the most. But these are two tiny countries compared with Africa. And the 60% of arable global land is situated in Africa. So that calls for looking into food baskets investment in Africa. And we are presenting this plan to our partners. We are now engaging with the US government since the US-Africa Leaders Summit. We are engaging with G7, and we are engaging also with G20 for partnership for win-win benefit. So in this regard, I think this is very important. We have to transition into robust regional and global market integration, and that helps support the AFCFTA. We have our own agreement for rapid implementation, and also address the deficit on market intelligence and infrastructures. The fourth one is on policy reform and institutional capacity building for transition to be enhanced. We have deficit of capacity in Africa, and there is a need for the global north to support in capacity building in our continent. So I think when we talk about this, there is a need for policy harmonization and understanding through negotiation, coherence and coordination between our policies. There are a number of hurdles for African investment and export to reach to the Northern Hemisphere, and that calls for some kind of policy coordination and harmonization in order to get a common benefit. And finally, there is dysfunctioning global food security governance. You know, we used to have some governance structures like FAO, WFP, and some other global institutions. But the pandemic and the global supply chain disruption has shown that these organizations are dysfunctional. What else do we have? We do not have proper global governance system in place, and we have to deal with that and fix that problem so that there will be more cooperation and collaboration between North and South in terms of this transitioning. So I think these are the main 5 issues we are negotiating with the global North, as I mentioned earlier. And therefore, we have to make our house in order. In Africa, we have to have our own negotiating points, leverage points in a proper way so that we negotiate with the North rather than beg them to get resources and investment because morally they are obliged. That's not a correct way of negotiation. We have to show them that investing in Africa has benefit. Investing in Africa has, profit out of it. So that's where we have to focus and change our narrative of always complaining about that the North has destroyed this climate and this world, and they have to pay for it. But that didn't work so far. I think we have to work in a tandem together, and partnership is a key for that, and fair and justice is a key in that kind of negotiation to convince the global North to work with us in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So I will turn to the speakers now, briefly introducing each of them. So Mr. Pascal Lamy, I think everyone knows you here, and we just have 27 minutes left, and your CV is probably 20 minutes to go through, but you are mostly the Vice President of the Paris Peace Forum and the former Director General of WTO. And so just, His Excellency highlighted the broken governance, North-South, on the topic of food and the dysfunctioning global governance on the topic. Given your experience, what do you see as the main reasons for this divergence in the agricultural agenda, both on the amount that is being spent on the African agriculture, on the definition of sustainable agriculture, on trade conditions, and so on? Why do you think it doesn't work?
Well, I'll try to answer briefly this question, which could be answered in 5 or 6 hours. First, I start from where you started and where Haile Mariam started. Africa has a specific major agri-food problem on this planet. It's the continent where the disproportion between the reality and the potential is the greatest. Africa is the place where you have most undernourishment on this planet, both in terms of quantity, quality, and it is the place which overall has the largest agri-food potential production. So that's the starting point. The reasons why we are there are many, and Haile Mariam has mentioned a number of them. Most are structural. There's a bit of, hopefully, conjunctural problems with zones of conflicts and so on, but most of these issues are structural. and they have to do with the fact that Africa does not properly mobilize its natural capital in agriculture. Without entering into the details of why we have this situation, which the diagnosis needs to be in our minds, let me answer your question in saying that if we agree that the major solution is on ramping up investment in agri-food systems, my answer to why do we not have a proper alignment between what the North should be and what the South should do is in the fact that this has never been seriously addressed. And I think I'm very thankful to Haile Mariam for having diplomatically touched on a number of these topics. So if I want to answer your question simply, the North and the South have to take both sides of the agenda. The North has to provide for technology and science and for finance. The main solution in raising African agricultural productivity, factoring in the negative impact of climate change on this productivity, lies in science and technology. And this is mostly, for the moment, owned by the North that needs to transfer it, whether it's about agronomics, whether it's about irrigation systems, whether it's about new digital tools for farming, which are spreading all over the planet. So number one, science, technology. Number two, finance. If that is the Northern agenda, recognized by both sides, then there is an African agenda, which in my view is governance, and there is still a lot to be done, for instance, in the legal regime of agricultural ownership in many countries in Africa. And we know that this is an impediment to investment. And the other part which Africa needs to do for its agricultural system is finance. And on this, I'm totally aligned with what my good friend Mo Ibrahim said this morning. If you want capitalists on this planet to invest in agriculture in Africa, which is quite an attractive proposition, you first need to show that Africans are doing it. If Africans do not do it themselves, if they don't show that they put their own money, and there is, as we know on this continent, quite a lot of that big money coming, if they don't invest in their own modernization, productivization of agriculture, it's very hard to convince the North. So that would be my simple recommendations: science and technology and finance from the North, governance and finance from the African side. This is, by the way, very much what we've tried to promote at the Paris Peace Forum, taking agriculture, like a few other topics, as a specific North-South relationship to rebuild, which is why we've launched this call last year, the belief of which is Africa can not only feed itself, but benefit from its comparative advantage in a planet which needs food as demographics or the nutritional transition ask for that. So that's one of the axes, and it's also, unsurprisingly, one of the axes of the Africa Union Foundation, who has also taken Africa as one example of this North-South realigned partnership which we need.
Thank you. Very insightful. I will turn now to Abir Imsefer. Abir, you looked at this both from public sector side, within the Ministry of Agriculture of Morocco, now with your deputy CEO of Azura Group, one of this African group investing strongly in the African agriculture. You also Director General of the Initiative for the Adaptation of the African Agriculture to Climate Change. So where do you see the biggest obstacles to achieving this thriving African agriculture, which Pascal mentioned?
Thank you very much. Well, Patrick, we have been involved a few years ago, both of us, in this initiative AAA, and I think that we have indeed addressed a lot of topics that were mentioned by Mr. Pascal Lamy. And I think for me, and we have this, those thoughts at that time, there can be no sustainable approach for the African agriculture, not combined with the fact to raise the incomes for the growers. You cannot come and explain to African small, medium, or even big farmers that they're going to be only living like the constraints of being sustainable without having a clear answer for how to raise their incomes and how they can keep, having this agriculture as a source of income, because this is the case, here in Morocco, for example, and I know that it's even more important in the African continent, but 40% of the population in Morocco is a rural population, and this 40% takes about 80% of its income from the agriculture sector. So we still, in Africa, sometimes we forget the social impact of the agriculture sector. And there is another subject, and I'm very happy actually and honored to address it beside Mr. Pascal Lamy, because when he was the boss of the WTO, I was a young chief trade negotiator for Morocco for the agriculture sector, and at that time everyone was advocating for the benefits of the free trade. And nowadays, as representing an agriculture group settling in Morocco and exporting to Europe because it's 12 kilometers far away from Morocco, and of course, having a clear commitment into sustainability. And again, sustainability for Africa is adaptation. I mean, it's not a choice. It's something that we are obliged to do and to face every day. And now we are seeing, all the protectionism running all over Europe, and this is something that, definitely cannot coexist with all the sustainability commitment that we want to do from the other side. And this is something that we don't understand, that makes us really afraid from the future. And again, Mr. Lamy has mentioned investment, and maybe is making us afraid to invest more and more in agriculture in the African continent, because when you see the doors closing in front of you, not even because we're asking of a better access to the markets, but just to keep the access as it is today. And I think that we have seen the results of the European election yesterday and this morning. But it is about the relationship between the two continents, and it is about sustainability and free trade.
Thanks, and thanks for contextualizing in the news yesterday night, which obviously not necessarily very encouraging on that front. Let me turn now to Ilyas El-Fali, who is Managing Director in charge of Corporate Strategy and Sustainability at OCP Group. So among the priorities, we said we need to invest more, we need to improve productivity, we need to prepare for better resilience to climate change, and that will go inevitably with intensification of the agriculture, because the alternative is deforestation. So what are the winning strategies you believe for intensifying the African agriculture while remaining and taking care of the sustainability imperative?
Well, I think it all starts by acknowledging one basic yet powerful fact, which is that agriculture productivity and sustainability go hand in hand. They are not opposite, and that's something that we've been taught by maybe the old green revolution models that agriculture growth requires deforestation, requires massive application of inputs, and comes at a cost to the environment. Well, it doesn't have to be, and we are convinced today that actually productivity and sustainability are not only compatible, but they are complementary. So each one feed in the other. When productivity clearly reduces nutrient losses, reduces pressure on deforestation, which in turn, I mean, the sustainability also improves the resilience of agriculture and productivity by improving soil health, amongst other things. The role of businesses and the private sector in particular is to find the right business models that share efficiently the created value among the different stakeholders and give the right incentive to all stakeholders to work in that direction. And this, of course, starts with the farmer, who is clearly the main or the critical contributor to any such transition. Customized fertilization is a lever in that in achieving so. It's a lever that combines both productivity, agriculture productivity, and sustainability. And maybe let me give you one or two examples of where, from OCP's experience, where this work and provide results. First one is Ethiopia, which is given as a benchmark. I think His Excellency mentioned this in his keynote speech. It is a model today in Africa. Ethiopia is one of the very few countries that achieved the Abuja target, 50 kilograms per hectare, improving also its agricultural output. Cereals production improved by or increased by 25% over a period of 10 years. So it's really a spectacular example of where customized fertilization work and provide value also to the farmer, because when we started working with the Agriculture Transformation Agency on new fertilizers adapted to the soil, adapted to the crops and to the environment, tested those over a period of 3 years, we found out that it increases yields by up to 40% and reduces the cost of fertilizers to the farmer by 20%. So that's why, naturally, in 5 years, Ethiopia doubled its application of fertilizers, and of course, the farmer livelihood improves as a result. This is the kind of models that we are trying to apply, and the potential is much larger than that. Yields in Africa are only a quarter of their potential today. Another example is Nigeria, where, even an investment in last mile services, school labs to train farmers, one-stop shops to extend services and inputs, provide inputs to the farmers, also tripled the use of fertilizers in Nigeria over a period of 10 years. So, I mean, strategies, I would say, first, three main, I would say, pillars for strategies. First is focusing on the farmer and soil health. Second is investing in innovation and R&D. Customization is possible today because technology reduces the cost of customization. So invest in R&D and technology is a must, and we are in the premises of the university, which is a key contributor to this in the continent. And obviously the third component is partnerships along the value chain. Of course, we need coordination, we need partnership, private sector, NGOs, financial institutions, research institutions, and others.
Thank you, thank you. So we talked about what producers can do. Oops. So what agricultural producers can do. No, you should do it again. Everyone woke up, so that's very impactful, I need to say. What producers can do, what input providers like OCP can do, like what international organizations and the role of the cooperation can achieve. Let's talk now about what local governments can do, and I will turn to you, Mr. Hamadi Boga. You are Vice President of AGRA. You dedicated your life to the development of agriculture in East Africa, across Africa. So what do you consider are the most critical actions from local governments to really boost the agricultural sector, and what is the role of the broader ecosystem that they can cooperate with?
Thank you very much. I think this is, we appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences as AGRA, working in 15 African countries and also supporting the African Union around the issues to do with agriculture. I think the number one thing that we have seen as very useful is to have the political will invested in making sure that the agriculture sector is properly supported. Where there is political will, we have worked with African governments, most of the governments that we engage, to make sure that their policy and regulatory environment is facilitative for the sector, is farmer-facing, and is also facilitative to investments. I think the most important thing that we try to drive is to make sure that the leadership of the country see investment in agriculture as investment in rural development and not just as charity. The other thing that would work, but usually doesn't work quite well, is what has been spoken to, the issue of investing in research and development, and not just stopping there, but linking it to education, training, and extension. Because we are dealing with a smallholder farmer who at times is knowledge challenged, has very low abilities to adopt technology. We have to stay with the farmer, see what challenges they are facing, and feed back into the research and development ecosystem so that we can create a support system that is sustainable and so that they can be able to embrace new technologies, including the new conversations about sustainable farming systems, regenerative agriculture, and conservation agriculture. All this, for them to land with the African farmer who is a smallholder farmer who is resource challenges, they need support from the R&D system. And so African governments have to invest in this, and so that even as technologies come from the north, they must find an ecosystem that is receptive to science and technology. And that requires investments. Usually about 1% of the agricultural contribution to GDP is what was proposed by the Malabo declarations, but most of the time the investments are missing. And in the absence of political will, also the investments of the 10% becomes a challenge. From the data and the interactions with African governments, what we have seen, they are still investing majority around 1.5%. And yet we have seen from the example of Ethiopia and Rwanda and even here in Morocco that where there is significant investment from the public sector, the private sector also invests, and then the sector is lifted. Apart from that, I think because we are talking climate and the unpredictability of weather with the frequent droughts and floods, I think investing in water harvesting infrastructure is very critical for farming to be sustainable and not to be so exposed to the vagaries of the weather. So I think I'm not talking about large-scale irrigation systems. I'm talking about farm-level irrigation systems suited to smallholder farmers. Household water pans, very small, but very critical, and we have seen them lift people out of poverty just by making sure that every household has a water source and is able to farm throughout the year. And of course, mixed farming in some communities that we have interacted with, we have seen them rise to a level whereby they're exporting horticultural produce into Europe, things like French beans, and you can actually see the difference. But I think there needs to be more investments in this area. Apart from that, of course, financing agriculture is very critical, and it requires also political will, putting the money in the system and attracting the private sector to make sure that the system is supported. Finally, I think critical for decision making, even for investors and for everybody else to be able to make the right decision, is consolidate agriculture data for the continent. I think data is too fragmented. Most of the time, when there is a crisis, people start scrambling around looking for information. And sometimes it's very hard to come by. And in our case as AGRA, we are investing in what we call AGRA-STAT, but working with countries to make sure that they have a data ecosystem that is reliable and that can be used upon by both the public and private sector to make investment decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers. So we will make now an announcement, and I would like to draw your attention to a new initiative that is being launched by the Paris Peace Forum on the African agri-food systems transformation. You mentioned, Pascal, the call for mobilization. Africa can be a major agricultural power, which was launched and announced in November during the last edition of the Paris Peace Forum. And we talked about one of the priorities to create this table to get out of the dysfunctioning global governance on food, which Your Excellency, you mentioned. So this announcement, this call was signed by 15 institutions, including IFAD, AGRA, OCP, UM6P, AFD, CIRAD, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, many others, including ourselves, BCG. So I'm glad to announce that today 9 other organizations have joined this growing coalition, including the International Consortium of Agronomic Research, the CGIAR that you know, and their name is just a nightmare for a French speaker. CGIAR is really difficult to pronounce, but they are joining the coalition, that's the most important. The Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab Network, GPAL, the 4 pour 1000 International Coalition that focuses on carbon sequestration on the soils, which was launched during COP21, the International Center for Advanced Mediterranean Agronomic Studies, the CIAM, Innovix here in Benguerir, the Climate Action Platform, Africa, the West African company Farmer Line, the Brazilian Center for Carbon Research in Tropical Agriculture, and the University of Côte d'Azur. So these are new organizations signing this call for mobilization. There will be plenty of others, and I would like now to give the floor to Pascal Lamy to make other announcements on this initiative.
Thank you very much. By the way, CGIAR, which I recognize is a totally unpronounceable acronym, stands for a consultative group on agroeconomic research. And it's a network of research centers, which I think brings quite a lot of contribution to adjusting agro-food systems in order to make them more efficient. Now, what I will say now is, in a way, the direct consequence of the previous conversation. We did not engineer it this way, but it happens to fit quite nicely with what was said, which is the launch today of Atlas. That's an acronym which I think we can
Easier to pronounce.
reasonably
Thank you.
use, which stands for Agricultural Transitions Lab for African Solutions. So, whereas what we did already with the Paris Peace Forum was a call, a declaration, which, as you said, is now joined by a very large group of stakeholders, the Atlas is the platform that will try to move this call to action into implementation and reality, starting from what I think we all agree on, which is that we definitely need to accelerate the African agri-food system transformation, and that this has a lot to do with investment, which is, I think, nutshell of what we have shared. So Atlas will be the platform for this North-South policy dialogue we need in order to align better what both sides have to do. And that means trying to reach a consensus on issues which for the moment remain where it remains either evasive or impossible for the lack of proper trying to find this consensus. And second, together, increase advocacy for more investment in public-private systems. So this Atlas, which is sustained, supported by the Secretariat of the Paris Peace Forum, will have basically three core activities, each of them, by the way, very much in the Paris Peace Forum culture. First, advocacy, so multi-stakeholders dialogue in order to align a vision. Second, knowledge, disseminating more what we do to try and drive this conversation forward and make it more balanced in terms of both the sides of the discussion. And third, which is also in the culture of the Paris Peace Forum, spotlighting initiatives and platforms that align with Atlas priorities in order to give to this platform a visibility, a window of attention by the public and by the business and by academic systems that they otherwise would not have. So, right after this panel, I will have the pleasure to co-chair with our friend Ibrahim Mayaki, whom I think we all know in this room, and Rémi Rioux, who happens to chair the French Agence Française de Développement, the inaugural roundtable of Atlas. Again, it's a way to move this conversation further into building a shared vision that then would result in more North-South alignment, more North-South investment by both North and South, starting with the Africa-Europe partnership, which I think is a very good case in point on how to move this forward. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So, with this, we conclude this this roundtable, this panel. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you to all the speakers for your valuable contribution. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the inspiring inaugural speech. And let's go to this now roundtable on Atlas. Thank you.